the thing that's inspiring about Fernando Romero's work is to understand that architecture that is experimental and being realized oftentimes is not taking place in the US, but is taking hold elsewhere. And that the opportunities that architects have aren't always in America, but in other places. And for us to be able to see the types of experimentation and challenges that can be realized in buildings is a thing that is clearly demonstrated in Fernando's work. It's a pleasure for us in that way to be able to learn from his experience and his accomplishments. Also, I think for us, it's a great way for to us to realize that these developments that are happening abroad are not just happening in Asia or in Europe, but much closer to us, as in Latin America, and that the potential exchange, both on a personal and professional level, but also on a level of understanding the design potentials that exist abroad yet nearby can be demonstrated, is demonstrated in Fernando's work. Fernando graduated from the Ibero-Americana University in Mexico City, and then went on to work for a number of prestigious architects in Europe, including Enrique Miralles and Jean Nouvel, and then for OMA. And then recently moved back to Mexico City and started his own office called Laboratorio de la Ciudad de Mexico. And it's with great pleasure that we welcome Fernando Romero.
Thank you very much for this invitation, and thank you very much to Jeffrey to make it possible. If it's possible that we turn completely the lights, will be much better. So first project I will show is an extension of a house in Mexico City. Modern architecture has been in a high degree influenced by this conscience of making the buildings easy to get built. Parallel planes and parallel columns makes a glass house typical of the Latin American modernity, a very functional object. In this scenario, we were commissioned to do an extension of this house. We decided to avoid the predictability of making the extension in the big part of the garden, and instead of that, we decided to do it in the back part of the house, between these two trees. The client wanted to create an extension room where the children can play and that have access directly to the garden. So we have been studying in the beginning the possibilities of working with an organic project, with an organic surface that was at the same time an opportunity to research a specific type of materials and specific conditions of Mexico and environments in construction. Here was the first solution in which we convinced the client that we wanted to create a ramp as a continuous skin that by wrapping itself was containing the room. Here a diagrammatic translucent render where you can see how this ramp was connecting to the main space, that is a children's room and a playing space, and at the same time is connected with this modulated traditional house. The structure was built in Mexico in 3 weeks. It was an interesting experiment for us to see the opportunities of having a very low prices of hand production, but combined with the same, almost the same techniques that you can find in America, such as cutter laser process in order to create a model in 3D, and after that take the same drawing, digital drawings, and with that build a steel skeleton structure. As you can see here, the structure was only touching in 2 points, and the rest was liberated in order to read and reinforce the concept of having a continuous skin that was wrapping in itself. This is an example of how the structure was done. It was basically The same way you build a maquette in this, I'm sure in your laboratories, we simply drew a kind of reticle by 1 meters and then started to build the structure. No? Basically, he's composed with main structure with thickness of 20 centimeters in one direction, and then with two main columns that are, let's say, carrying all the weight of the building against the old house. This is a very domestic video, but basically it's related with our ambition to start a project that will become a digital book. We try to avoid to repeat the already so built projects of books of architecture in paper, in which you're able to see part of the reality, but not totally the quality of architecture in more terms or more complete. Here you can see how in 3D, through a video, you're able to see space, you're able to see movement, light, and get more better understanding of the buildings. No? Here you are just walking around the ramp and getting inside the project. Part of the concept of this project was to try to avoid these typical limits of modern architecture with parallel planes and with straight lines surrounding and defining the space, and try to create a continuous space, softer for children, and at the same time like a challenge for them in the process of getting to know how to walk. This is an open view where you can see this kind of continuous element that at the same time is carrying the full building. We have been all the time interested in trying to search in human beings the opportunity to define our projects, so that design is not only based on intuitions, but more based in specific knowledge that we can search in our clients. We have been convinced that we are not going to build a specific style, but rather we believe that architecture is a translation process. In that translation process, many forces, such as the interest of the client, the budget, the technology, the culture, the type of labor, the materials, the sites, and the ambitions, started to build different environments. We think that in some environments, organic architecture is the best solution to address the some interests of searching a specific design, but we still are confronted, and you will see it in this presentation, that our projects have a range of very different process and languages of and process of translation. We are building a lot of boring boxes, as we never imagined to do it, but at the same time with them, we are able to build a more interesting expertise that will complement all these type of projects, that at the end we know it's where we will spend more time in our design process. The next commission I will show you is a private house. This is in the Ocean Pacific, in a place called Ixtapa. And we were commissioned to do a house. The regulation of this environment was trying to convince us and push our limitations to build a house with a tilted roof of palma that is usually carried by 4 columns. And what we have been interested in was to review that regulation and to try to convince both authorities and the client that was interested to do a reinterpretation of that regulation. Basically, they give some measurements where we should place the swimming pool and some measurements where we should place the house. These were some of the first studies where we were trying to search the continuity through a single movement that can separate what was the public space from the private areas of the house. That means that in the lower part of the house we will accommodate living and eating space, and on the roof, in second floor, we will accommodate all the rooms. This is a plan of the last design where we compose the 0 level by a thick wall that accommodate all the main services, such as the kitchen, the TV space, master bedroom. And by doing that, we give a privacy specifically to the client in order to have this continuous space with the living space, eating space, together with the swimming pool, with a roof open span of 20 meters in concrete. we have tried to build in the way that is similar of how they built the ships in this area. We tried to review the possibilities of doing something that was not only the interpretation of the program, but at the same time a new opportunity to try to work with this specific climate. This is the open living space. Here you can see eating space with the living space. This continuous geometry with the swimming pool. Here we accommodate part of the services so that you can have also a type of air conditioning that will help to maintain this space more fresh. Again, here a very domestic video that you will see how you are accessing the house. The door becomes simply a window to the ocean. And here you are just walking through these two walls of services before you get into the living space. Typical breakfast date, and then another 360 degrees video of the main living space. The next project I will show is on the border. We have been interested in the border for a long time. In the last 4 years we have been trying to research, and now we are currently producing a book of this area. When Vicente Fox started to become the president of Mexico, both presidents, including Bush, make a strong commitment to try to reinforce the qualities of the border and bring much more budget in order to restore this area. As you know, more than 300 crosses are done every year between the border of Mexico and the United States. The second more important income for Mexicans is the money that Mexicans do in the working day in the United States. So in a way, a very important part of the stability of our country is based on this income. We think that for these reasons and for other reasons, such as the big difference between these two countries in terms of the infrastructure, the technology, the education, and the income per capita, will make this region one of the more extreme conditions in the world. This is the division in terms of theoretical division. That is a way of measure this surface in the border that is considering that the real border is only 200 kilometers far away from Rio Bravo. But the real mass and the real density is totally different topography, totally different based on the sister cities that are giving the engine of movement to this area. This connection is happening every day through 61 points of connection, and our client requests us to do a bridge between El Paso and Juarez. That is just the center of the border between the two countries. This is the site, and he wanted to build something similar to Bilbao in terms of contemporary architecture. Obviously, when we visit the site, we realized that we wanted to do something much more economical. As you know, all the Mexican side of the border is basically, especially in the center of the border, is basically a landscape of warehouses. So we proposed to the client to do something much more economical in terms of design. And basically the project is quite simple. It's only a compression that is exposing the real limit between the two countries. Always the border is a very invisible limit. So what we propose to the client is, by doing that compression, we will respect the regulations of height of the river. We will make that the whole metropolitan area have a kind of symbolic way of reading the border, but at the same time, by doing that, we will make that the bridge is a kind of metaphorical window to the neighborhood country. The idea was to have multi-purpose spaces, especially addressed to commercial activities, and also to have a kind of work opportunities for Mexicans. So it was the spaces that are going to be sold for international companies, and they will offer services, and this will reduce the time that Mexicans spend traveling around the United States. And on the second floor, here hanging, is the Museum of Immigration, that basically will be to host and show all the story of many of the important immigrants that has arrived to the United States and became very successful in their personal lives. This The whole idea of the client was to do something that becomes a kind of symbol of the mutual influences and of the mutual cultural dependencies between the two countries. Currently, the client convinced the two sisters to donate the site, and we are currently developing schematic development. This is the plans in the first phase of the project, where the basements are the spaces where we will accommodate all this system of filters for security. So this will allow Mexicans to cross the border, as well as Americans crossing the borders, and having a much more efficient and secure way of crossing the border, both for American concept of security and for Mexican. And the upper floors are composed by a ramp of multi-uses that can be used also for performances and theater and different activities at night, so that it has also the opportunity to be open and changing for close. This is a diagram of security that obviously when we start to propose a project, both cities were very concerned, is this realistically possible or not? And the way it will work is similar to an airport. You will have an international zone. People that will get in, it will always need to pay a ticket, present an ID, have a picture, and then go inside the project. These are some of the schemes of the structure. Finally, we find the proposal of having a concrete skeleton that will get built first with a number of cables that inside this skin will have a continuous sliding element that will allow that when they touch each other, then you will liberate the cables and have a monolithic structure between the two countries. We always try to show this project as part of what will define our practice, because in a high degree is again repeating the opportunity of understanding better our position as being practicing in Mexico, because it's again a kind of position of being in the middle of development and in the middle between two very extreme conditions. One, our reality in terms of education, in terms of economy, in terms of corruption, in terms of a process of a joint democracy that is searching to have a more efficient way of working. The next commission, it was in a high degree inspired for the bridge. Again, this is another bridge in China. It was a recommendation by Jack Herzog that is currently doing 400,000 square meters master plan in Jinhua city in China. This is 2 hours from Shanghai. And we thought that was interested to reuse the concept in a different way, because here we don't have a specific limit. Here, what was requested was to do a tea house. So what we proposed was that, because it was next to a little lake, that the tea house can also work successfully in a bridge. Also because there are two parts of the project that we thought was interested to link. In one hand, the new development of Herzog, and in the other hand, the old city. So what we propose is a bridge that has a mirror roof from a plan, a twisted one, that by integrated the structural solution was separating independent little rooms where you can gather people in different scales of reunions. This is the cut of the plan, where you will see that type of very unpredictable solution of how the structure is organized. The idea was that we will not come to the perfect structural solution, but a combination of our ambitions of doing both an interesting quality of space and then working with engineers a very intelligent solution for the structure. The next project is in San Diego. It was a competition in which we were invited to do a museum of immigration with a totally different position from the bridge. In this case, the client wanted to do a monument to celebrate the fantastic collection of immigrants that exist in the United States, and do a type of monument to each of them. So we have been working intensively with the client. This is the site. They wanted to do something that was similar to a box, Obviously, because the specific moment of Yokohama, we proposed to the client that the building should not be totally horizontal, but instead should be something that was much more vertical. And by doing that verticality, the project will be also visible from the center of the city, but at the same time will give the opportunity of many of the people to try to have a view from all the port in a different height. I show you those maquettes because I think it's part of what most of the architects today are confronted. Are we in the digital era? Are we using only digital, or are maquettes still a way of working? And I think we are precisely maybe the last generation where we haven't lost the dependency to maquettes, and at the same time we are starting to understood better the opportunities and potential of engines of digital processing design. Some of the maquettes already show the ambition of doing a number of deformations in a kind of topography or contained landscape. Finally, we discovered that the more interesting way was to do a concept that enables the client to understand our proposal. What we wanted to do was a number of deformations that by connecting all the information related to the immigration of each of the continents and give to them different dimensions. So, for example, this represents the Indonesia, this represents Africa, this represents China, and basically to try to argue that each of those deformations were going to guarantee the connections. Sorry that something got lost in the computer. Then the next project I will show you is basically a museum of Holocaust. This is in El Paso. We were commissioned to do directly a museum of Holocaust, and we start to study and analyze the qualities of the David star. David star is a fantastic geometry that is not only the simple combination of two triangles, but at the same time it's unlimited an historical and rich symbol that in the time has been addressed in different cultures. For many people, this represents the duality between two elements, and for other cultures represent the link of those two joints between the two triangles that represent the 12 communities that were in the desert traveling before they found the relation with Jesus. Then basically this is the site specifically. It's very close to the bridge between Paso and Santa Fe. It's next to a freeway that is used every year between 10 to 15 million crosses. It's the Interestatal Road 010. And basically this is how the site looks like, with a tilted wall that is typical, I think, from this economy. That is the way American engineers resolve the difference of height between the connections of the city and the freeways. What we proposed to the client was to do a project that enabled to integrate that tilted wall with the specific architectural solution. The program is organized in 3 steps. One is the exhibition zone, the second is the infrastructure and facilities of the museum, and the third one will be a number of services that are going to be used especially for commercial purposes. What we came out is very fast in the process was that if we give volume to each of these triangles and we superimpose them, we will have a kind of joint, structurally joint between the two elements that will allow to link 2 different conditions. The lower one that will be used for more permanent situation, and the second one that will be used more for temporary exhibitions. These are some of the process of the studies in maquette in the beginning of the design, and we wanted to create a number of platforms that enable the user to have almost a continuous path to the roof. This is a schematic view of the project. It was basically, again, this idea of integrating the building with the landscape of the specific site condition with this tilted wall, and to put it in a high degree exposed to the freeway. So some of the maquettes. And it's a very similar situation of the bridge, only because of that compression that is never visible in elevation and never in 3D, but it's visible at the time you start to draw the plans. our ambition was that these planes are going to be also what it ties the structure interiorly, and it will be built in concrete walls. A schematic render, just to present a bit of more detail of the program. This was the entry with a number of commercial activities, and then the opportunity to have that symbolic connection between these two walls. Apparently, the whole concept was that we will have a future gallery in the first level, and that we will starting to go to the deep of the history of Holocaust Museum as soon as we were just walking around the building. We have been working intensively in a part of this project, searching the possibility of doing something that reduces the cost of the project. As I was involved in the concert hall in Porto by Rem Koolhaas, in which we have spent too much energy in trying to resolve these tilted walls. So in a certain degree, I'm sorry that the image has changed, but in a certain degree we were convinced that another possibility was to research the possibilities of doing a translucent building with a membrane of textile that will reduce all the structural weight and will simplify radically the process of construction. The next project I show is a private house. It's the first project I have done in the year 2000 in Mexico. It's a single house with a very low budget, and basically this is the diagram of our solution. We do a double height living space, sinked, because it was originally in an area that where a swimming pool was based. So we proposed to the client to reduce that level and try to propose a living space that was a bit hidden because also was in front of a very noisy condition. And then to create a connection to two single rooms that were the private areas of the house. These are the plans. So basically you have living space and then a stair that links you to two rooms that are connected to the terrace that is at the same time the elevated, tilted terrace and the roof of the living space. So in a way was our first attempt to try to review modernity. So this modernity in this way is simply amplified because it's an horizontality that has been amplified in such a way that users cannot really walk through the facade, but the axis became an independent element. And the facade is something that is in a way out of scale of human beings because it's only 1 meter high. And it will bring the natural light sufficiently to have a good living space. This is a view from the master bedroom with the user. And it was a very good opportunity because it allowed the studio to have his first commission. The next project I show you is a bar in La Condesa. La Condesa is an area of the city that's for whom has been in Mexico City is one of the areas that has the highest density of artists living in the city. And it's an area that is situated in the center of the city with a lot of services such as restaurants, cafes, etc. So it has become a kind of fashionable area with a lot of terraces. And we were commissioned to do a bar. A restaurant and a bar, and basically we proposed to the client to try to avoid any kind of discussion of whether the design should be in one way or in another way. We basically convinced him to do a very diagrammatic and non-design solution in which the restaurant was organized close to possible service areas in the back, and we have only a bar, a continuous bar where we can serve the drink. Basically, the solution of the facade was a kind of very simple and logical way because we wanted to have glass, red glass, simply because the interior would serve Chinese food, and the client simply liked it. We researched in Germany what type of glasses were available. We find a red glass. We find the dimension that was easier to chip and cheaper and faster and more economical, and he loved the idea and was basically the only way to do it with this specific client. But at the same time was for us a good opportunity to avoid all the complexity of designs that define this specific area. The next commission is an office building in Mexico City. This is Palmas. That is the main district, business district in Mexico City. The site has the quality of being surrounded by vertical elements. And our client has bought 15 years ago one little house, and with the time has started to buy more houses. So we were commissioned to do an office building for a private bank. These are the plans, 22,000 square meters each plan, 4 levels of parking, and then 3 levels of offices. This is 0 level. This is against Palmas Avenue, and this is the public branch bank, and then these are offices of the bank. And in the 3rd level, there is a private museum of the collection of this specific branch. That's why I mentioned in the beginning that I think in some specific environments, even that we don't like to admit, the client has certain interests that will define since the beginning the process. Even that we didn't want to do a specific box, at the end the negotiations simply bring and drive us to a conclusion that the only way to translate a bank and what a bank needs to offer in a way is trust, and in a way is confidence, and in a way is a traditional way of doing the things and not doing risky things with your money. So basically it was the specific solution we developed together. That render was just a schematic. It went through 1 year process of design in which we basically do a very efficient structure for efficient plans, and then we try to resolve the facade in a more rational way. This is the Here you can see the site with these 4 independent houses, and then this was done in 2 months, and the building full completion was built in 9 months. This is both risky and attractive. Risky because there's no time for details, and also because some of these process in 9 months, some of the times things became simply avoid. Many of the main discussions are simply avoided because of a reason of time. These are the glasses that were produced in New York. It's a laminated glass that reduces the noise for the client, so in that sense was a bit logical. What we proposed to the client was simply to do a perforation in the axis, so to clearly identify the axis, to do another deformation with the regulation allowed us to go beyond the limits of the site, and then to do an advertising that is basically a beam that is at the same time a screen where the bank can just expose some of the more important programs. I showed this video just to show the condition of having an horizontal building in front of vertical elements. Most of these buildings has more than 20 floors, and this building has only 8.5 floors. This building is in the side of Las Lomas. There is a residential neighborhood, so it was no other way to resolve the building more than in 8.5 meters. And what we only try to do is to create a system that the lower level is a kind of random, is not random, but it's an equal size of glasses, because it's where you have equal size of offices in the lower floor. And in the 2nd floor, you have totally different size of rooms and also the museum. So we proposed that the bigger glasses were on the 2nd floor for that reason. So in a way, it's almost predictable, boring, and we never mind that we were going to show this and never in SCI-Arc, but at the same time, it's part of the reality and the process. And thanks to this project, we are starting to have more expertise to join and get closer to better commissions. This is a typical project in Mexico City that is done with the cheapest budget that you can do a project, build a project in Mexico. Is done with brick, very thin columns in concrete, and basically it's a house for elderly people. So the house is organized in 3 floors, and what we proposed to the client was simply to create a system in which the old people can have the more efficient plan and reduce as much as possible the distance between each of the programs. So we have 2 floors with private rooms, 60 suites, and then we have another floor that have eating space, offices, a library, and then a chapel. This is to see the process of construction. That was for us an interesting opportunity to try to get in contact to the more simplest way of building in the country. And at the same time, what we proposed to the client was that because each person has completely different sensibility to light, especially when we get old, what we proposed was to create a system in which a random number of windows were creating several different conditions of room. All the rooms with a very good quality of light and always with natural ventilation inside. The site has a fantastic collection of trees. So what we created was a kind of system between linking some of the more important views against each of the rooms. The next commission I will show you is a house. A house for always has been the opportunity to define a collection of interest, and that's one of the reasons why I think has in the history drive in a high degree the interest and the research of the architects. So in a way it's like the perfect opportunity, especially if you have a good client, to try to research and try to materialize better the way in which you think architecture is going in a specific moment. I think in a house you do all the activities of the city, so that is also one of the interesting things to resolve. How you eat is completely different of how you go to read a book and how you go to the toilet and how you sleep and how you maybe make love and how you rest and how you do absolutely mainly all the activities that you can do outside of the city, even do sports and do exercise. You can almost everything, including doing business, you can do it in your own house. So this is Chapultepec Park. This is Mexico City type of Central Park, and the house is situated next to the park. So basically what we proposed to the client was to this is the existing house that the client wanted to demolish, and what we proposed since the beginning was why we don't try to review that modernity of the Villa Savoy in terms of not having a floating house based on columns, but having a deformated box that was at the same time carrying itself. And by doing that was resolving the services, the structure, the solution of the project. These are some of the first studies of that concept. And we were intensively trying to analyze the possibilities of how the access, the kitchen, and some of the services are going to be the part of the house that are going to touch the ground. And by doing that, like in this little maquette, this was the access, you were going to organize the house in a type of two continuous level, and you will also be able to explore the possibilities of having a terrace in the middle of the trees. In a part of the process, we were thinking, why we don't try to simply organize the house as a number of totally independent bodies, in which between of them we can organize a kind of patio. The client didn't thought that was a good idea because they thought that was going to be extremely complicated to clean, etc. And then obviously we continue working with them and also with the consultants of Feng Shui. And then they were just hesitating why the house should be floating or not, because the consultant recommended to them that the house should be touching the ground. So we continue working the project, and we basically propose, this is the last solution, we propose to have 3 steps, 3 type of columns, one where we will organize the living space, the second where we will organize the eating space, and the third one where we will organize the access to the house. And the rooms will be floating, and will with that cantilever creating a some spaces for special occasions such as parties, etc. So in a way, it's a kind of very controlled continuity, tropical interpretation of La Savoy. No? We are currently starting construction of this project, and I hope next time I have the opportunity to show you with more detail. The next project I show you, and I'm not going to take too long, this is in Japan. This is outside in a little town called Kanazawa, and the commission was to do In the surroundings of Kazuro Sejima, the Japanese architect, has done this fantastic museum. The concept of his museum, her museum, was to do a translation of the collection that the museum has in little boxes inside this organic continuous liquid space. So, for example, this is a specific piece by James Turrell, and it's a fantastic open space roof. And basically, each of these little boxes represent a specific piece that this curator has carefully chosen. We were invited to do outside the children's space. This is a construction site. It's a fantastic city that has a very old park that has the biggest collection of trees in Japan. It's a city of 3 million inhabitants, and this is the site where we were basically going to work. We work in several different schemes, such as having a kind of continuous interpretation of the circular plan as an option one. Option two, to combine those different diameters and creating semi-covered spaces in a continuous skeleton of body. Option three, to have a kind of interior labyrinthum that was constantly changing in thickness. And option four was try to reinterpret the opportunity of having more enclosed space where you can watch the building through different little windows. This is a section of that skeleton that has been a process of a couple of months in which we were trying to make a skin of resin that was at the same time resolving the weight of the specific project, so that you don't have two elements, structure and then covering of the structure, like many architects has resolved recently big commercial projects, but more to try to have a skin that was doing both defining the space and resolving the structure. Then the last project I will show you is a tower in Mexico City. This is a tower in Santa Fe. It's a housing tower. Santa Fe is an area of the city that has been the #1 point of development in the city in the last 5 years. It starts with a private university, Ibero-American University, and then a couple of important companies surround that building. This was 5 years ago, and with that, this became the more important business center in the city because it's very fast connection to the wealthiest residential area of the city. They have built an important commercial center, and with the time, office spaces were over-constructed, and the city changed the regulation of all these sites and opened the opportunity to do housing. That housing, it's a market in Mexico City that will never stop. Also because, but partly because it's a speculative process. People buy apartments, and even if they are not going to use them, they buy it because it's a very profitable business that goes beyond the interest that the bank can give to them. So, for example, if they buy an apartment, they will have much more benefit by selling the same apartment 1 year later than by having the money on the bank. In the development environment, most of the clients always want to do rational plans, square plans, simply because it's the safest way to assure that the product will be sold. We have been working 1 year, and we finally convinced the client that we can actually do the combination of both. We can do an organic plan, but also we can offer to them rational rooms. That means that we will offer to them rooms that enables the client to have their private spaces totally rational, organized, and efficient, but at the same time the living space, that is where usually you have the free, more organized layout, is the area of the plan that will give the continuity and will give their specific personality to the project. Here you can see the first year process in which we basically analyze the market, the second year process, and then the third year process, in which we realized that the apartments, ideal apartments, was 160 square meters, because it was a perfect apartment to allow you to have either 2 rooms or a third room, or including also a possible service maid that can help a young family. No? And then the living space in the front, we realized to do 3 apartments per floor. It's a 34 floors building. By doing that, we were able to have always very good views for the living space, and then very rational plans, still including also good views for the private areas. This is the structure. To build in Mexico City is always a challenge because it's an earthquake zone. You basically build on top of water, so it's always an issue how you can make a building of this height built that enable to be still business, so there is not beyond the limits of the process of the business, but at the same time that is secure enough to guarantee safe for the users. We work 1 year in the facade process. This is a kind of a schematic renders. Obviously, the end, the result was to do something as cleaner as possible with a kind of louver that will reduce the use of energy inside the project. This is the mention related to the earthquake zone. Again, basically the building is standing in a big platform where you have 4 levels of parking. And then here's an exaggerated exercise of the structure where you can see that basically the solution is based on that green element that is inside the project. That is the elevator core that is linking this basement with the top. Coming back again to what we were mentioning in the beginning, no? For us, architecture is a translation process, and we will not be enabled. We don't want to avoid the opportunities of doing this type of projects, even that we know that it's only part of the process. I don't want to excuse myself, but when you work with developers, the opportunities are getting shorter, smaller, and then the design process gets tighter. But at the same time, this is what it's allowing the studio to work in bigger scale projects and in more interesting opportunities. The reason why the plan needed to be organic was related also by this freeway. There is a freeway that connects the more important and closest resort to the city, that is Valle de Bravo. So for us, this was not a normal site. It was a very exceptional site because it's the higher point of Santa Fe, and this will become the highest point in Mexico City. So we wanted to convince the developer that it was important to push the project a bit further and try to have a kind of continuous plan without sacrificing any functionality of the plan. Okay, this is my last image. I basically finished with this project because I think this is the challenge in Mexico. We are currently working in a mixed-use building that will contain hotel, office, and commercial spaces. And what is interesting about our specific environment is that this young democracy allowed you to still be able to negotiate with authorities in a very positive way for the design process. In this case, we convinced the city that the deformations are going to be the translation of the historical elevations of each of the roads. This is the road of Circuito that has very old modernistic buildings. We propose to them to keep that height, and then against the Mariano Escobedo, that is basically a hotel street, we propose to have another deformation, and then to go to the limit that is possible to get built. We also convinced the city to translate part of this parking to the neighborhood club that is going to receive a rent for the next 10 years for that building, for that purpose. And basically the quality of this project is in the middle of this kind of paradise, well, for us paradise, that is Chapultepec Park. I think it's the only way in which we can continue working, in which we have this opportunity to have this proximity of technology in one way, at the same time very low costs, at the same time a very open-minded government, and at the same time very unique conditions for the environment of construction. Thank you very much for your attention, and thank you, Jeffrey, for the invitation.